Welcome to another Nerd Rant.
Hi there. It's been a while because I think it's no secret that you spent your entire winter not in Germany but in Portugal.
Yes, and I pity myself for having come back too early because it's April now and it's winter. It's freezing and it's snow. And in general, the feeling here in Germany is kind of weird. Let's put it that way.
True, but to be honest, I had to endure this for 4 months, longer than you, so...
Yeah, okay. You are worse off than I am. This topic of today's Nerd Rant, which of course is more rambling than ranting, is blatant advertising.
That's true, because we have novelty on entagma.com.
Not yet, though.
No.
It's going to be released soon-ish.
Soon-ish. That's true. No, I'm working on, for quite some time now, I'm working on a new course about, you guessed it, Blender geometry nodes.
And why is that?
Because usually Entagma, and that is our history, is associated with Houdini, and that is of course very true. But to be honest, it's more about, for us at least, it was more about procedural art or procedural design or generative art, generative concepts, algorithms in general. And as you probably know, I told this already in one of the last Nerd Rants, I am using Blender at the university, and that is why I got aware that Blender added geometry nodes.
So anyone not aware of you, of you spending your time at the university, you are a professor at Nuremberg Tech, and I think now you're teaching your 4th or 5th semester?
The 4th, yeah.
4th semester.
That's true.
And you're teaching CGI.
I'm teaching CGI and I'm teaching Houdini, but I'm starting out with Blender because it is, I think it's a good software to start your journey into CGI.
Why is that?
Just because it is somehow easier because it's not that vast. Mm-hmm. It has not as many features as Houdini. Yeah. It has fewer features, and not only that, but for the most part, the workflows are just set in stone. So there is not 25 possibilities to do a rig, but there is one way to do a rig. That is, of course, not very flexible in the production environment, but if you are learning rigging, it's a good idea to just follow the rules first. Once you pull this off, then you can break them, switch software, do something else, do it more efficiently.
So constraining yourself when you're starting out and then just brushing out.
Exactly. And that is why I got interested in Blender, and now Blender added geometry nodes, which is a procedural concept. And it's procedural. It's pretty similar to Houdini in a way. And as Blender is very accessible to a lot of people because it is for free, and it is developed quite rapidly, and the render is for free, I think it's relevant. People want to use it, and I don't think there is already a course explaining the concepts behind geometry nodes, so I started to do this. And back on the screen here, you see one of the graphics that I prepared for the course. So the course is dealing with the basic concepts of proceduralism, explaining how geometry nodes is implemented inside of Blender. But not only that, we will touch on topics like programming and data types and vector math, everything that is needed to understand this, and then create some projects inside of Blender using geometry nodes.
One of which is the project we're seeing here in the background, which is this kind of a sci-fi interface that we're seeing here.
Exactly. So I tried to find 3 large projects that consist of many individual parts that are interesting, sort of, and that cover a topic that is useful to some. And one of these topics is this head-up display sci-fi type graphic that you see a lot, and this is entirely built in geometry nodes procedurally. All the components that you need to create this sort of graphics are built, and I will show you in the course how to do that, how to pull that off from the very beginning. So we start with just altering a cube, and then we create, for example, this scene here.
And I think you have other scenes prepared as well. I think you talked about 3 major ones. So Let's have a look at some of the other scenes, maybe.
That is the second one. So the structure of the course is we start with the very basics, and we will create some intro projects like sculpting some alien rocks procedurally or creating a grass field and stuff like that to just familiarize ourselves with the basic concepts that are behind geometry nodes. And then we will first start with this setup, and underlying we have a MoGraph system, a little bit like mobs in Houdini. So how can we use geometry nodes to build a component-based architecture to do MoGraph effects? And then we create this component for connecting the dots. So this is basically my very, very first Houdini tutorial that I did on Intagma, ported over to geometry nodes. And then we combine both to create this transitioning effect inside of Blender. So that will be the first project. And we will not tackle this in one large tutorial running for hours. Instead, we will have little pieces that deal with one portion or one part of the effect at a time. And if you follow along, you not only can build this, but you will learn what geometry nodes is all about and all the intricacies that are in this system.
What would you say would be one of the major, or maybe the major prerequisite, or if there are any, from a person starting this course?
Well, actually, there are not many. Basic knowledge of Blender is assumed, because I won't explain in detail how to model something or what edit mode is.
Yeah.
It is about geometry nodes. But regarding geometry nodes, no prerequisites required. I will explain everything, even the math.
Is this a course or set of videos that you would consider helpful or interesting for Houdini artists as well?
For beginners, yes, for sure, because the concepts are really quite similar. Of course, geometry nodes works a little bit different regarding how you use nodes, especially geometry nodes combines both worlds like SOP level and WOP level. But both is handled in the same tree inside of geometry nodes, but nevertheless, the concepts are the same. So, of course, if you watch this, you can just use the knowledge one-to-one, or you can port it over to Houdini without changing it. It's just the nodes are different, of course, they are named differently. Other than that, it's perfectly possible to do that. So the course is aimed at beginners, so people starting out with proceduralism, who did not work procedurally before, and who want to get going fast and easy. For these people, the course is planned. And there's one other specialty. If you watched material that I created on Intagma in the past, I always created quite lengthy tutorials covering a large portion of the topic, and that will be different with this course. It is split up in small chunks, not longer than 15 minutes, and builds the effect piece by piece.
So would you say that maybe this course can also kind of work as a gateway drug into proceduralism and into more advanced topics and tools, for example, Houdini?
Could be the intention a little bit, maybe. No, that is exactly what I'm doing at the school, at the university. I'm starting out with geometry nodes to make people, or to familiarize people with procedural concepts, and once they understand this, then they switch over to Houdini, use the same concepts, and extend on their knowledge.
Understood.
And not only that, I even use both systems, like Houdini for advanced geometric effects, and then geometry nodes in Blender to import the data, for example. I already created a tutorial for that. I think it's a good idea to start out with Blender geometry nodes, even if your goal is to learn Houdini afterwards.
And I mean, if you could elaborate on that. We touched on why you think that is a good idea. Maybe, I don't know, touch on that or elaborate on that a bit more while we are going to have a look at this third setup that we're seeing here, which is quite impressive, I must say. I quite like that one.
Well, it's not really realistic, because I'm not implementing proper bending of the branches. It's just a noise field going through this
But
tree.
nevertheless, it works for what it is.
I think for a stylized tree it works, and we will build this from scratch, and that's quite a nice exercise, because it involves a lot of geometric concepts, and then instancing stuff around and working with curve parameters and doing some procedural particle style effects without simulation, because Geometry Nodes, as of now, does not support simulation yet. So this is just analytic. Nevertheless, it looks like particles. And I think if you follow me building this tree, maybe you have good ideas how to expand the concept and how to make it even better. But I think for games, for example, this might work.
Touching on games, is there any focus in your course on VFX versus games versus MoGraph?
Not really. It's really about, I want to teach you the concepts of proceduralism, no matter where to apply them. So it really doesn't matter. It's this graphic design-y MoGraph effect, and then the head-up display that is more film-oriented, I'd say, and this tree could be used in games, but that is not the focus of the course. It's about familiarizing yourself with working with numbers, with data types, understanding control structures, understanding vector mass, how to put nodes together to create an algorithm. That is the focus of the course. So if you never touched on this before, I think the course will be for you.
On a more general question, do you think now is the right time to get into Geometry Nodes, and if so, why?
Absolutely. I think every 3D artist should consider trying to learn procedural concepts, because that is the future. If you ask me, we don't have, or the time and budget constraints are getting tighter and tighter, and it is important that you use these procedural concepts, because they will speed up your workflow. They will make you, or they will put you in a position where you can deliver faster and more complex results than by just using traditional workflows. And that is why I think that in the future, a 3D artist has to understand at least the basic concept of proceduralism, programming, and math. CGI is a very technical topic. That's just a characteristic of the medium, and I think we have to embrace this, because the development at the moment is that there are more and more tools released that make CGI very easy for people without any knowledge about CGI, like programs that allow you to compose a 3D scene, or even Procreate on the iPad now allows you to draw or to paint on 3D objects.
Photogrammetry, 3D scanning has become very easy in the last months.
That means more and more people can do 3D, standard 3D. So if you want to make a difference for your employer, you should be able to deliver more, to understand more, and to really make the software your own and tell the software what you want to do. Because I see a lot that in CGI, the software is a constraint to creativity, because you come up with a concept, a creative concept, and then you alter it just because you cannot pull it off in the software, because you are lacking the knowledge. And that is something that should not happen. The design decisions that we are making should not be driven by technical aspects. It should be, of course,
well,
sometimes they have to be.
Sometimes they have to be. I think also if you have something that liberates you or enables you to do more than you were able to pull off previously, that can be driven by tech. But I think it becomes an issue when tech is just limiting your creative vision or your design decisions.
Absolutely. And to avoid that, I think the 3D artist has to, at least glance over the technical part of the subject or of the field.
Given the current state and the, let's call it, very dynamic development of Geometry Nodes in Blender, do you think that might be something to consider before starting this course, or when diving into Geometry Node, as kind of a challenge or more as a chance?
What exactly do you mean? That Geometry Nodes is changing so rapidly?
Yes.
I mean, they had quite some quirks while developing it, because they just went in a different direction and then saw, well, that is probably not the right way to do it. Now I think they tackled that. Okay. So I don't think that the principle will change again. Instead, I think we will see very soon just more features like dynamics and simulation. or even something like node-based programming for objects. Just like in Houdini, they're expanding on it. Yeah.
Maybe let's talk about this. Let's talk about the direct comparison of geometry nodes versus Houdini, and let's get this from the current state of geometry nodes versus Houdini, which is April 3rd, April 4th,
2022.
2022, yes. So let's be frank and realistic about positives, negatives of Houdini versus Blender and vice versa. Could you enlighten us there? What's the...
Yeah, a lot of people ask me this question. So Houdini artists, of course, consider geometry nodes being a toy, and Blender artists usually are not into proceduralism at all, but you prefer the classic workflow. Yeah. So geometry nodes has sort of a hard time finding its place. And let me tell you, frankly, geometry nodes is, of course, no comparison to Houdini at all. It is very limited regarding the features. It can do stuff, but it can only do so much. But that is only true for the features. So if you are looking for a certain thing to do, like an explosion or some fluid simulation, you're out of luck with geometry nodes because the nodes are just not there. Simulation is not there. That said, the concepts used in geometry nodes are all in place and everything is there. Everything is just as powerful as Houdini. And if you want to learn about proceduralism, you can with geometry nodes. And you can quite some stuff, as you can see here. Of course, not everything, but a lot of your life gets a lot easier by using it inside of Blender. And everything that you learn while using geometry nodes can be applied to Houdini or even to blueprints in Unreal or even to Substance Designer. So these procedural concepts hold. That is why I think it's a good idea to use it, even if you're not a Houdini user. And I think it probably eases the transition a little. If you want to probably look into Houdini, it's maybe a good idea to start out with geometry nodes because this is proceduralism inside of an environment that you already know if you are coming from Blender. And once you familiarize yourself or embrace these procedural concepts in this familiar environment, then it might be easier to switch or to add Houdini to your workflow.
Yeah, I see that from the experience that I had with geometry nodes, which was mostly through your guidance. I must say that I'm a bit torn on this. On the one hand, I see geometry nodes being very limited currently in comparison to Houdini, that's clear, which also could be an advantage because it forces you to learn underlying concepts and more basic concepts and structures. I can see why geometry nodes would be easier to learn when you're staying in the same user interface, same UX configuration. But also, again, in comparison to Houdini, building more advanced setups, more complex setups is just tedious with the set of nodes.
Absolutely. Here. And that is important. Thanks for pointing this out, because this course is not for people that want to achieve these results that I'm showing here as quickly as possible. You can use plugins for that. Even for Blender, there is plugins creating these height lines, these ISO lines. Or you can use Cinema 4D to achieve this result a lot quicker than I do with geometry nodes. And in Houdini, it's just a thing of using 3 nodes. I'm building this setup from scratch, so I'm implementing marching squares from scratch with a lot of nodes, very, very tediously, a lengthy process. And I'm doing this not because I want to pull off these lines. I'm doing this because I want to teach you the concepts how to implement an algorithm like marching squares using visual programming. And you can do this in Blender with geometry nodes, and you can do it in Houdini. In Houdini, you don't have to because the algorithm is already there, encapsulated inside of a node, and eventually it will come to Blender too, but that is not the point of the exercise. The point of the exercise is getting familiar with how to port an algorithm that is defined in a paper or that you can read about online to a visual programming system that you are using. Same holds true for this connector dot thing, this plexus-like effect that I'm doing there. It's tedious and it's not very elegant how I implement it. I'm implementing it using the possibilities that I find in the geometry nodes. But you will learn a lot about implementing these things, and hopefully that will enable you to build your own ideas inside of geometry nodes. That is the idea behind teaching this, not creating the effect as fast as possible.
All right. I think
That's it.
as part of my questions that I had regarding your plans with this course, where to take it.
Well, maybe some organizational remarks. So the thing is, this course will be on entagma.com. And as always with our courses, it will start without being finished. So I think we will start once 6 or 7 or 8 episodes are online. Then the course will start, and then we will add to the course on a regular basis. So new episodes will come all the time. But these 3 setups are the first 3 setups that the course will tackle. So before that, we will have some basics, and then we start with these.
And they're going to be part
setups.
of our standard Entagma offering. So with just subscribing to our premium content, you get access to everything that we released so far, including this Blender GeoNodes course.
Yes, and if you decide that you have to look into Houdini or that you want to peek into Houdini, then you can, because all the content is there.
All right. I think, that's it for this time. Blatant advertising. Hope you gained some insight nevertheless.
Yes.
And until next time, as always, that is cheers and goodbye.
Goodbye.